Hi, welcome to Making Sense with Delise, and my name is Delise. And in this video, I'm going to discuss the communication strategy of trying to be right, where we often see that there's a right and a wrong in any negotiation. We're going to talk about the effect that this has on relationships, and why we might do it, and what we might do differently. So this video is part of a 5-part series on 5 losing strategies. And these are common strategies that many of us use at least some of the time. And these strategies are designed to get us what we want in relationships. However, they usually have the opposite effect. Trying to be right is one of the ones that I've often used in relationships, and sometimes still do, unfortunately, when I'm mostly stressed or at my worst. What I have found that it often was a way of trying to make myself feel better and also have a sense of control over what I needed. These strategies often bring in hurt, misunderstanding, or hostility and resentment to the relationship. So these strategies usually start when we're trying to communicate with one another about what we want from our partner. And we can want simply to be heard or want attention, or we're asking each other to do something or not do something, essentially communicating about what is going on between us and what we might want from each other. The difficulty arises, of course, when there is a difference in perspective or being able to give each other what we want or need at that time, and then we have to deal with that difference or that disappointment and so on. Now, when we're communicating in relationships with our partner and each other, and we have particular difficulty in accepting any other response than agreement or being able to give you what you want, then trying to be right can be a strategy that you might use to attempt to make the other person's perspective wrong. After all, if what they are expressing is wrong, how can they refuse you or end up not agreeing with you, and so on? So trying to be right can be seen as an attempt to avoid the discomfort of disappointment, loss, lack of control, and feelings of shame. Winning an argument can be temporary relief from this. And trying to be right is always the basis of any argument. Debate or trying to win an argument has a place, and that place is somewhere like in a courtroom, but not in an intimate relationship. Many people will say to me, but there is a right. They did this or that, or I know what I heard them say, etc. And there certainly may be some truth to what you are perceiving or experiencing in any situation. What becomes problematic is when we focus our need to win and trying to win on that piece of truth, and this has detrimental effects on a relationship. So let's talk about what those effects might be. Firstly, I'd like to talk about two main dynamics, two ways in which partners express this. The first is what I call a kind of right dynamic, where both partners have learned this strategy as a way of getting their needs met. So when it's kind of both people having this tendency, then it often leads to a lot of arguments, as being right, as we've said, is the basis of any argument. Wouldn't be an argument if there wasn't a right or wrong. So the second dynamic is what I might call a sort of power over right dynamic, where there's one person in particular in the relationship who has a very strong need to be in control, and being right goes along with that. We'll talk more about this in the video on the strategy of control, but just to say right now that when it is coming from one person in particular, often the other person is in reaction to that and often gets drawn into arguing or just trying to be heard, creates kind of a need to not be in the losing position. And so one person in particular will end up feeling insignificant, small, or powerless, or shamed. And it can really sometimes become very exhausting just trying to be heard to justify their experience, thoughts, or needs. So that person might withdraw more and more and end up giving up or even leaving the relationship. So no matter whether it's the first dynamic or the second, there is this sense that someone ends up feeling dismissed, unheard, and shamed. The person in the winning position may temporarily feel good, but it's at the partner's expense. So these negative feelings of kind of shame or insecurity or feeling dismissed and so on become commonplace in the relationship. The second effect on a relationship I want to highlight is that in order for anyone to really expand and develop, we need to learn and be open to new ideas. So the same goes for in a relationship. And research shows that couples who express more satisfaction in a relationship are those who allow each other to be influenced by one another. So remaining open and able to grow. And it's very difficult to be influenced if we are trying to be right all the time. This strategy also ends up not leaving the person who's trying to be right feel that great either. It might sound like there's kind of confidence booster to be right. However, often the underlying reasons why somebody might want to be right stems from perfectionism, meaning that when you're not right, you're not perfect. And if your self-esteem is kind of wrapped up in trying to be perfect, one of the effects in a relationship is no one is going to end up getting out of it feeling okay if there's a focus of someone's right and someone's wrong. Another thing to consider is also that having to be perfect makes it very hard for your partner to talk about aspects of the relationship that they're unhappy with, as that will threaten your confidence in this feeling that, okay, I'm not perfect because there's something wrong in the relationship. As this strategy and others we'll talk about later take hold in a relationship, then the need to be right is associated with highlighting and proving that the other person is responsible for the difficulties and all the pain you are feeling in the relationship. This ends up happening because, for one, people selectively hear and see what matches their beliefs and experiences. And part of our defense mechanism, the protective parts of us, is designed to pay attention to negative signals that could put our survival or well-being at risk. So the more the relationship goes down this kind of toxic, resentful communication style, the more you will feel the need to protect yourself. And so as that kicks in more and more, you will start to look for more and more negative things happening in the relationship, so that this trying to be right and the truth that you perceive is going to be skewed even more. Of course, we never have the whole truth anyway, but from this assumption, your strategy of trying to be right and win is going to be focused on whatever it is that you're trying to protect yourself from. We often have themes around what it is that we're trying to protect ourselves from. And this is because we've often brought them in from our past. For instance, a parent who provokes debate with their children in order to win themselves will leave a child in the losing position because it's really easy to overpower and win over a child, which is super unfair and cruel. Also, families where competitive conversations were common, or parents who were very critical leave people with this need to win. So being right can develop as an attempt to protect yourself from these kinds of experiences, from a lack of control, shame, being blamed, and also in needing a sense of justice. So if you want a happy, intimate relationship, you have to give up on trying to be right, because you can't be right and happy. The two things don't go together. And that means recognizing you don't know everything and also learning to be empathic. This is really difficult to give up on because we need our truth to be right so often so that we can feel kind of validated. Often we need somebody else to see it and agree with it. Unfortunately, especially in close relationships, our partner has their experience, which is not going to be the same as ours, especially when our truth becomes narrowly focused on making them wrong. Letting go of trying to be right often involves letting go of an identity that defines you as a person who is in control and valued for knowing stuff, or being the person people turn to for help or information. And if you let go of that identity, what does that mean? Who are you going to be without those things? But this is what you need to let go of. You have to come to terms with not knowing, with uncertainty, and not being kind of on top, the one that is better than. What it comes down to, in many ways, is that we are no better or no worse than anyone else, and that we're all just kind of muddling through the best we can. And if you can have that as your guiding principle, then you can learn to let go of trying to be right. To acknowledge that we don't know can be particularly difficult. I know this because it took me until my early 30s to be able to say I didn't understand something. It was so shameful to me to be ignorant. However, when I did say those words, it was so liberating, and I actually ended up learning so much more from other people rather than having to figure it all out by myself. And I felt better about myself because I didn't have this pressure on me of having to know everything. In a relationship, there is more to know about how your partner feels and sees things, what is their piece of the truth in any situation. People often say to me, but I can admit when I'm wrong. Unfortunately, this is kind of missing the mark because it's still part of this perspective. Someone's right and someone's wrong. It's really not about that. In relationships, we need to learn that it's about two perspectives and experiences, and the focus being more on understanding each other and how we see things differently. And then we can sort out together what the way forward is. An important skill is to be empathic. And we can only do that when we're in a state of openness. So we have to move from this kind of protective place and seeing our partner as a threat to us to a grounded, curious perspective. So if you haven't seen my video on being reactive or emotionally reactive and how to change that, there'll be a link in the bottom to that video, as that is a good start to begin to change any of these strategies by being able to change that protective place where we feel under threat. Putting yourself in your partner's shoes and seeking to understand their experience, of course, is the heart of empathy. And when we're trying to be right, we're actually really absorbed in our own experience, and hearing anything about anybody else's experience can feel very threatening and take us away from our certainty about our position that we've got to hold on to in order to keep proving that we're right. This is not easy because you're likely to have to face some painful feelings around how you feel about yourself, and that can be very vulnerable. One thing to realize is that if you are trying to be right over your partner, they will not want to share things with you or discuss things with you. You will become more and more distant, and they may even over time withdraw or leave the relationship. And your ability to experience closeness and true intimacy and appreciation and joy with one another will just diminish. So thank you for watching, and I hope you liked this video and it left you with some things to think about, at least in terms of trying to be right. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe so that you can learn about the other losing strategies. Until next time.